Kobe Bryant's childhood gym gets demolished, but hidden inside is a mural of him at age 12. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sky over Lower Merion was gray and heavy, hanging low over the cracked concrete of the old rec center. A chain-link fence wrapped around the building like a noose, and bulldozers sat in the parking lot, engines still cold. Rick Marino stood by the entrance, hard hat tucked under his arm, staring at the battered gym he had first walked into almost 40 years ago. "Today's the day," Dante Ellis said, stepping up beside him. He was the youngest on the crew by a good 15 years, still wiry with energy, but his voice carried hesitation. Rick nodded without looking at him. "Yeah. Today's the day they bury dreams under concrete and glass." Behind them, the rest of the crew was gathering, yellow vests flashing in the pale light. Rick gave a short whistle, and the workers lined up, waiting for instructions. He cleared his throat. "First wall goes down at the south entrance. Take it slow. There's old piping back there we don't want to bust." His voice was steady, but inside, it twisted him up. As the workers headed toward the machines, Rick stayed rooted in place, looking at the battered doors. He remembered opening them as a teenager, dragging in scuffed sneakers, the smell of old wood and sweat wrapping around him. He remembered a young boy, barely 12, dribbling a ball on that cracked court for hours after everyone else had gone home. Kobe Bryant. Before the world knew his name, Rick knew that kid had something the rest didn't. Determination so thick it filled the whole building. "You okay, man?" Dante asked, noticing Rick's far-off look. Rick forced a laugh. "Just thinking about the ghosts we're about to wake up." Dante shrugged. "It's just a building." Rick almost said something but stopped himself. No use barking at a kid who didn't know. No use blaming him for what time had erased. The engines fired up with a roar, shaking the ground under their boots. Rick motioned toward the first wall. The operator of the wrecking ball gave a quick thumbs up. Rick lifted his hand and brought it down. The first swing smashed into the wall, sending a thunderous crack through the morning air. Dust exploded outward. Concrete chunks fell like hail. Dante shielded his face, coughing as the old wall crumbled. "Hold up," one of the workers shouted. Rick squinted through the dust. A large piece of drywall had fallen away, but behind it wasn't just brick. Something was shining underneath the rubble. It caught the light, soft and golden, like the glint of a memory. Rick jogged over, Dante at his side. Together they knelt and started pulling away the broken plaster, careful now, hands moving with urgency. "What the hell is this?" Dante muttered. As the dust settled, they uncovered a mural painted directly onto the wall, faded but unmistakable. A boy, maybe 12, in a Lower Merion jersey, grinning wide, cradling a basketball like it was the most precious thing in the world. His eyes were full of life and dreams. Rick staggered back, heart hammering. He didn't need to read the tiny scrawled signature in the corner. He knew that face. He had seen it 1,000 times from the bleachers. It was Kobe. Not the global icon, not the Lakers superstar, just a kid with a dream too big for his body to hold. Dante whispered, "No way." "Is that really?" Rick didn't answer. He reached out and brushed his calloused fingers lightly over the painted jersey. Some of the dust smeared away, revealing the number 33, the number Kobe wore before the world demanded he become a legend. The other workers gathered around, silent now. Even the bulldozer engines were killed. A rare hush fell over the site. Rick turned to face them, voice rough. "Nobody touches this wall." "Rick," the site manager called from across the fence. "We're on a clock. Demolition's gotta stay on schedule." Rick stood tall. "There's a kid in that painting who changed this town. Changed the world. We tear this down without a second thought. We're worse than the ones who forgot him." The site manager shook his head, frustrated. "You want to risk your job over a picture?" "It's not just a picture," Rick snapped. "It's a promise." Dante stepped forward. "We found it. We should at least call someone. The township. Somebody. The manager hesitated, then muttered into his walkie-talkie. Rick let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They had bought a little time, but not much. The workers moved back, giving the mural space like it was something sacred. Some took out their phones, snapping pictures, sending them off into cyberspace where, maybe, someone important would see. Rick sat down heavily on a broken bench and stared at the mural. His mind flooded with images, Kobe dragging his duffel bag bigger than his body, shooting free throws in the dead of winter with frozen breath clouding the air, running suicide drills alone, not because anyone told him to, but because he wasn't done getting better yet. He felt Dante sit beside him. They watched the dust swirl around the mural, like the building itself was breathing its last and exhaling one final memory. "You knew him?" Dante asked after a while. Rick smiled sadly. "I knew the kid he used to be. Before he became everything else." Dante looked back at the mural. "He looks happy." Rick nodded. Because back then, all he needed was a ball, a hoop, and a place to dream. The sky darkened overhead, and somewhere far off, thunder rumbled low and heavy. The kind of thunder that came before a storm. Rick knew the real storm was coming. Developers didn't care about memories. They cared about blueprints, deadlines, and money. And right now, the clock was ticking against them. He stood up, joints creaking, and dusted off his jeans. "We're not letting them take this without a fight." Dante looked up, unsure. "What can we even do?" Rick stared at the mural, at the 12-year-old boy immortalized in paint and dust and hope. "Remind them what it means to dream," Rick said. And then, without waiting for an answer, he turned back toward the gathered workers, ready to do whatever it took. Rick paced in front of the mural, hands clenching and unclenching. The workers milled around, unsure if they should pretend to work or keep staring. Every minute they waited, pressure built. Across the lot, the site manager barked into his phone, glancing over nervously. Rick could guess what was happening. Corporate was about to crush them. "You really think they'll let us keep it?" Dante asked, coming up beside him. Rick shook his head. "Not unless we give him a reason." The town had changed. New money, new faces. Half the people moving into Lower Merion now barely knew Kobe's name outside of highlight reels and sneakers. To them, this gem was just an eyesore. But Rick knew better. And so did a few others, if they could just get the word out in time. "Start calling people," Rick said. "Anyone who gives a damn." Dante frowned. "Who?" "It's a weekday. Everybody's working." "Then interrupt him," Rick said. "Kobe didn't make excuses." "Neither will we." Dante nodded, pulling out his phone. Rick turned to the others. "You all got 5 minutes. Spread the word. Call coaches, parents, players, neighbors. Tell them what we found." A few of the workers hesitated. They weren't used to defying orders. But one by one, they pulled out their phones, scattering across the site. Rick stayed by the mural, watching the way the painted Kobe almost seemed to glow under the dust. He thought about all the dreams born in this place. About the sacrifices nobody ever saw, the hours nobody applauded. And he thought about what it would mean if they just let it all be crushed. The site manager marched up to him, face tight. "Corporate says if you're not swinging hammers in 10 minutes, you're fired." Rick didn't flinch. "Then fire me." The man blinked. He hadn't expected that. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and stormed off. Rick turned back to the mural. "You're worth more than a paycheck," he muttered. Minutes passed like hours. Then, a car pulled into the lot. Then another. And another. Doors slammed. Voices rose. Rick smiled grimly. "Here we go." The first to arrive was Coach Simmons, a wiry man with a cane and a voice like sandpaper. He hobbled over, squinting at the mural. "I'll be damned," Simmons breathed. "I remember that jersey. I remember that smile. Others followed. Moms with toddlers, retired teachers, old players from Lower Merion's glory days. They gathered around the fence, murmuring, pointing, some wiping their eyes. Someone started live streaming. The mural spread across social media faster than Rick could have hoped. People commented, shared, tagged news outlets. A local reporter showed up, microphone and camera in tow, looking hungry for a story. Rick gave a quick interview, voice steady, heart pounding. This isn't just about Kobe. It's about what he stood for. Hard work. Dreams bigger than you are. We owe it to him, and to ourselves, not to bulldoze that spirit into the dirt. The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. Isn't the building condemned? Rick shrugged. Maybe the building's dead. But that wall's alive. Another car pulled up. A sleek black SUV this time. Rick's stomach twisted when he saw who stepped out. Marcus Kane. Rick remembered Marcus from back in the day, another Lower Merion kid, but not one who made it big. He went into real estate, made a fortune flipping properties. And now he was the developer behind the project. Marcus adjusted his designer sunglasses and surveyed the scene with a frown. He didn't walk over to the crowd. He walked straight toward Rick. "What the hell are you doing, Rick?" Marcus asked. "Saving something worth more than condos," Rick said. Marcus shook his head. "You think a bunch of Facebook posts are gonna stop me? I got investors breathing down my neck." Rick pointed at the mural. "You recognize that kid?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I know who it is." "Then act like it means something." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think Kobe'd want us living in the past?" He was about moving forward. Building bigger. Rick took a step closer, lowering his voice. Building bigger doesn't mean forgetting where you started. For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he clapped Rick on the shoulder hard enough to hurt. "You got till noon." Rick stared after him as Marcus walked away, barking into his phone. Noon. Less than 2 hours. Rick turned to Dante. "We need more people. Fast." Dante was already scrolling through his phone. "There's a Lower Merion alumni group. Thousands of members. I'm posting it now." More cars arrived. Former players, now grown men with their own kids. Some wore old Lower Merion jerseys pulled from dusty closets. Others brought photos, trophies, anything they could find. A makeshift memorial started growing at the base of the mural. Basketballs, sneakers, candles. By 11, the parking lot was full. News vans lined the street. Police cruisers idled nearby, watching but not intervening. Rick stood at the center, tired but unbending. Dante handed him a bottled water. Rick took a grateful swig. "You think it's enough?" Dante asked. Rick looked at the mural. At Kobe's young, fearless face. "It's never enough," Rick said. "But it's a start." A rumble of thunder shook the air. Clouds churned overhead, dark and heavy. It felt like the sky itself was holding its breath. Then, a cheer erupted from the crowd. Rick turned to see an elderly woman pushing through. She wore a Lakers jacket 2 sizes too big and clutched a framed photo. "Kobe's first Lower Merion coach," Dante whispered. The woman held up the photo, Kobe, grinning wide, arms draped over 2 teammates Rick barely recognized anymore. The image of that bright, joyful boy seemed to electrify the crowd. Rick stepped forward. "We can't stop the clock," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But we can remind them that some things are too important to destroy." The workers looked at each other, then at their machines. Nobody moved. Rick locked eyes with the site manager across the fence. The man swore under his breath, but he didn't lift the radio to order demolition. They were standing on a knife's edge, waiting. Noon was coming. And so was the storm. The church bell across the street struck noon. A thick silence fell over the crowd, broken only by the low hum of news cameras and the distant roll of thunder. Rick stood firm, dust on his jeans, sweat on his forehead. Dante hovered close by, glancing anxiously at the construction site entrance where two security guards had appeared, arms folded across their chests. The site manager looked nervous, radio crackling at his belt. He stepped forward a few paces, hand hovering at his walkie. Everyone was waiting for a sign. Instead, a black SUV rolled back into the lot. The same one Marcus Kane had arrived in earlier. This time he didn't get out alone. Beside him was a tall man in a suit, face stern, clipboard in hand. Legal muscle. Rick's jaw clenched. He recognized the type, corporate lawyer, here to make sure everything got crushed by the book. The lawyer and Marcus whispered for a few minutes. Rick could see Marcus gesturing toward the crowd, toward the cameras, clearly frustrated. The lawyer stayed calm, flipping papers. Rick knew what was coming. He was ready for it. The lawyer finally broke from Marcus and walked toward the workers. "This site has been legally cleared for demolition," he announced. His voice was cold and practiced. "Anyone interfering will be subject to trespassing charges and immediate removal." The words hung heavy in the thick air. Rick stepped forward, heart pounding. "And what about this?" He pointed back at the mural, the bright smile of a 12-year-old kid frozen in time. The lawyer didn't even glance at it. "Irrelevant. The property has been purchased, and all structures are slated for removal. Sentiment doesn't change the law." Beneath the lawyer's words, Rick heard the unspoken threat. Arrests. Fines. Lawsuits. All of it coming down like the wrecking ball waiting on standby. For a second, Rick's resolve wavered. He thought about his mortgage. His wife. The quiet life he tried to build after hanging up his coaching whistle. But then he looked around. He saw a teenage boy in a tattered Lakers hoodie, gripping a basketball so tight his knuckles were white. He saw an old coach wiping tears from his withered face. He saw mothers holding their children up to glimpse the mural. And he saw Dante, young and strong, standing ready to defy orders with nothing but stubborn hope. Rick turned back to the lawyer. "Go ahead," he said, voice steady. "Arrest me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rick stepped forward, crossing the invisible line between protester and trespasser. He planted himself directly in front of the mural. "If you're gonna tear it down," Rick said, "you'll have to go through me." For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then Dante moved, stepping beside him. Then another worker. And another. And another. Within moments, a solid wall of bodies stood between the demolition equipment and the mural, ordinary people turned immovable by a shared memory too precious to lose. The lawyer stiffened. "You're making a serious mistake." Rick smiled grimly. First time for everything. The police officers exchanged uncertain glances. Nobody moved to drag them away. Nobody wanted to be the one caught on camera arresting a town full of people defending the dreams of a boy who had once belonged to all of them. Across the lot, Marcus Kane cursed under his breath, pacing. He pulled out his phone and made a call, voice low and urgent. Rick couldn't hear the words, but he saw the tension in Marcus's posture, the frustration building. After a minute, Marcus slammed the phone back into his pocket and marched toward the crowd. "All right," he shouted over the rain beginning to fall. "You want to save your precious wall? Fine. But you're buying it." Rick frowned. "Buying it?" Marcus pointed at him. "You want that mural saved? You buy the wall. And the land around it. You got, what, an hour? Maybe 2 before I start sending bills to every one of you." The crowd buzzed with confusion. Rick's heart sank. He didn't have that kind of money. Nobody here did. "How much?" someone called out. Marcus didn't hesitate. "500,000. Gasps. A few people cursed. It might as well have been 50 million. Rick clenched his fists. He knew this was Marcus's way of winning without looking like the villain. Give them a choice they couldn't possibly afford. Dante looked over at Rick, desperate. There's no way we can raise that. Rick shook his head, breathing hard. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but a voice cut through the crowd. I'll cover it. Every head turned. A woman in a plain black raincoat stepped through the gathering crowd, pulling her hood back. Rick's breath caught. It was Vanessa Bryant. She didn't smile. She didn't grandstand. She simply walked up to Rick, eyes glistening with quiet grief and strength. Kobe wouldn't want his beginning erased, she said softly. He always said Lower Merion made him. Marcus gaped, speechless for once. Vanessa reached into her coat and pulled out a folded document. She handed it to Rick. It was a certified check. For $500,000. I'll buy it, she said. And we'll rebuild it properly. The crowd erupted in cheers, the tension breaking like a dam. Even the workers who barely knew what was happening pumped their fists in the air. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but the cameras were everywhere now, recording every second. There was no way he could spin this to his advantage. Defeated, he turned and stalked back to his SUV. Rick stared at the check in his hand, hardly believing it was real. You sure about this? He asked Vanessa. She nodded. It's what he would have wanted. Thunder cracked overhead, but nobody flinched. The rain came harder now, soaking them all, but Rick didn't care. The mural stood behind him, battered but unbroken. And now, it was safe. Rick wiped rain from his face and turned to Dante, who was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. You ready to build something real? Rick asked him. Dante laughed. More than ready. Rick looked back at the mural one last time that day. No wrecking ball would touch it now. Not today. Not ever. The rain didn't let up. It poured over Lower Merion as if the sky itself was mourning and celebrating all at once. Rick stood there, clutching the check Vanessa had given him, water dripping from his clothes, feeling like he had just stepped out of a dream he never thought he'd see again. Vanessa stayed only long enough to make sure the deal was understood. Her lawyer moved quickly, setting up emergency paperwork. Within the hour, the small patch of land that held the mural would no longer belong to Marcus Kane or any developer. It would belong to the people who cared. Rick watched her go, slipping away into the crowd as quietly as she had come. No speeches. No attention-seeking. Just a woman honoring the boy who had grown into a legend. The site manager looked lost, standing by the heavy machinery. The workers weren't moving either. No one wanted to be the first to act like things were normal again. Because they weren't. Not anymore. Rick pulled Dante aside. We can't just save the wall, Rick said. We have to build around it. Make something that matters. Dante nodded, shivering under the cold rain. Like what? Rick looked at the cracked concrete, the broken benches, the ghost of the court that had once breathed life into this place. A court, Rick said simply. A place for kids to play. For dreamers. For anybody who thinks they're not good enough. Dante's face lit up. A new dream court. Rick clapped him on the shoulder. Exactly. By evening, the legal transfer was signed. The half-acre of land surrounding the mural was now its own protected parcel, separated from the luxury condos Marcus would still build on the other side of the lot. The old rec center couldn't be saved, the roof was already caving in, but the wall with the mural would stand. That much was certain. The crowd thinned out as darkness fell. Reporters packed up. Police officers nodded their goodbyes. Workers sloshed back to their trucks. It was just Rick, Dante, and a few stragglers left, standing in the mud. Rick stared up at the mural, barely visible under a tarp someone had thrown over it to protect it from the rain. We did good today, Dante said. Rick nodded. We did. But tomorrow's coming fast. Dante looked confused. Rick smiled grimly. Saving it was the easy part. Building something out of it, that's where the real work starts. The next morning, Rick woke up sore and stiff, but more alive than he had felt in years. He grabbed a coffee, skipped breakfast, and headed straight to the site. He half expected to find the lot empty, forgotten now that the cameras were gone. Instead, he found a surprise. Kids. Dozens of them. Some dribbled basketballs through puddles. Some chalked makeshift court lines onto the cracked asphalt. Parents stood by with umbrellas, chatting and smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. Rick pulled his truck into the lot and got out, stunned. Coach Simmons hobbled over, balancing on his cane. "Word got out," Simmons said gruffly. "They figured if we're saving a court, they better start playing on it." Rick chuckled. "Figures." Dante jogged over, soaked to the bone, grinning. "Rick, you gotta see this," he said, dragging him toward the center of the lot. In the middle, an old metal folding table had been set up. On it, donation jars, old basketballs, faded photographs of Kobe in his Lower Merion days. "Community's raising funds," Dante said. One woman said she's donating her husband's tools. Another said she's got leftover paint from her house. Everybody's bringing what they got. Rick felt something tighten in his chest. Pride. Gratitude. Maybe a little awe. He grabbed a megaphone someone had left on the table and called out to the crowd. "I ain't good at speeches," Rick said. "But I know one thing. This ain't just about Kobe. It's about all of us. About dreams that start small and grow big when nobody's looking. So if you're here to play, to help, or just to believe, we got work to do." Cheers broke out, and it wasn't fake excitement. It was real. It was raw. By afternoon, volunteers arrived with shovels, paint, wood, and whatever supplies they could dig out of garages and basements. An architect from town even stepped forward, offering to design a proper open-air court for free. Rick and Dante organized the work crews. Kids cleared debris. Adults patched holes. One father drove his pickup back and forth hauling scrap away. An old painter named Joe offered to clean and seal the mural without damaging it, preserving Kobe's youthful smile forever. Rick worked harder than he had in years, hammering, hauling, directing. Sweat mixed with rain and mud caked his boots, but he didn't care. Every nail he drove felt like he was rebuilding something lost, not just a building, but hope. By sunset, the beginnings of a new court started to take shape. Makeshift hoops were installed. Fresh lines were drawn. A rough wooden bench stood under the preserved mural. Rick sat heavily on it, breathing hard. Dante flopped down next to him. "Think we can pull this off?" Dante asked. Rick looked around at the muddy lot full of laughter, the creaking backboards, the glowing mural behind them. "I know we can," Rick said. Dante grinned. "This gonna be called Bryant Court?" Rick shook his head. "No. It's for all the kids who dream here. Call it Dreamer's Court." Dante nodded slowly, letting the name settle into the wet evening air. Behind them, the mural caught the last golden light of the sun, and for a moment, it almost looked like the boy in the painting was alive again, watching them, cheering them on. Rick didn't say it out loud, but he knew what Kobe would have said if he were there. Keep pushing. Keep building. Don't stop when you're tired. Stop when you're done. The work wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long time, Rick was exactly where he needed to be. And he wasn't going anywhere. Weeks passed. Word spread faster than Rick ever expected. First it was just Lower Merion locals pitching in, then old teammates from across the state, and before long, donations poured in from people Rick had never even met, kids, retired athletes, parents who never saw Kobe play but knew what he stood for. The court rose from the mud, built plank by plank, board by board. Rick oversaw every piece, refusing to let the project fall into anyone else's hands. This wasn't just about laying down asphalt or painting lines. It was about stitching the town's heart back together, one that had been worn thin under years of change. By mid-May, Dreamer's Court was almost complete. The final touches were being made. Fresh backboards gleamed under the morning sun. The three-point lines were sharp and clean. At the north end, right above the court, the mural of young Kobe stood protected by a newly built archway, reinforced and sealed against time and weather. Rick stood at the edge of the court, arms crossed, watching as a few teenagers shot baskets. The laughter echoed off the buildings nearby, the same kind of laughter he remembered from decades ago when Lower Merion still felt like a small town and not just another suburb. "You did good, old man," Dante said, clapping him on the back. Rick grunted. "We did good." Dante was different now, too. No more aimless energy. He'd stepped up, taken responsibility, started talking about organizing weekend clinics for the kids once school let out. Rick knew he wouldn't need to watch over him much longer. The next generation was already taking ownership. As they finished cleaning up some leftover debris, a silver SUV pulled up quietly near the lot. Rick didn't need to guess. Vanessa Bryant stepped out again, simple and dressed in black. She approached the court slowly, taking everything in, the fresh paint, the new benches, the proud faces. Rick met her halfway. "It's done," he said. Vanessa smiled faintly. "It's beautiful." She walked across the court to the mural, running her hand lightly over the sealed surface. Then she turned to Rick and handed him a small black box. He opened it carefully. Inside was one of Kobe's original Lower Merion jerseys, the fabric worn and faded but still vibrant with history. Number 33. "I want it to stay here," Vanessa said. "Where it belongs." Rick swallowed hard. "Thank you." Vanessa took a breath, steadying herself. He used to say, it wasn't the championships or the awards he was most proud of. It was the mornings when nobody was watching. When he could hear the echo of his own footsteps. When he knew he was chasing something bigger than himself. Rick nodded slowly. He understood now. This place wasn't just where Kobe learned to play basketball. It was where he learned to dream, to push through the lonely mornings when nobody cheered. Vanessa left after only a few minutes, the way she came, without fanfare. Rick watched the SUV disappear down the street, the sun catching on its windows one last time. The dedication ceremony was set for Saturday. They didn't have grand plans, no big-name celebrities, no giant stages. Just the community. Just family. On the morning of the ceremony, Rick arrived early. Dante and a few other volunteers had hung up banners. Folding chairs lined the sides of the court. The jersey Vanessa gifted sat framed in glass at the entrance under a simple plaque, "For all dreamers," in honor of Kobe Bryant. People trickled in. Old teammates, local families, kids with wide eyes and worn sneakers. Coach Simmons sat proudly up front, cane resting across his lap. Rick stepped up to a small podium made out of an old gym bench. He looked out at the faces, the tired, the hopeful, the proud. He didn't have a speech written. He didn't need one. "This court isn't about looking back," Rick said. "It's about looking forward. About remembering that greatness starts small, and places just like this. It's about the first shot you miss. The first one you make. The thousand you take after everyone else has gone home." He paused, scanning the crowd. Kobe wasn't special because he was born talented. He was special because he worked when no one was watching. Because he believed when it would have been easier to quit. The crowd was silent, soaking in every word. "This court belongs to everyone who's ever believed in something bigger than themselves," Rick finished. "Dream big. Work harder. And never, ever forget where you started." He stepped back, and the applause wasn't thunderous, it was something better. It was real. It was raw. It was pure. Kids rushed the court the moment the ribbon was cut, dribbling, laughing, taking wild, joyous shots. Parents clapped along the sidelines. Elders swapped stories of old games played on cracked floors under flickering gym lights. Dante walked over, bouncing a ball casually. "You gonna shoot, coach?" Rick smirked. "You're calling me coach now?" Dante shrugged. "Feels right." Rick rolled his eyes but took the ball anyway. He moved to the three-point line, feeling every ache in his knees, every tight muscle. He hadn't taken a serious shot in years. The kids gathered, chanting good-naturedly. One shot. Rick squared up. His old form kicked in automatically. Elbow in. Eyes on the rim. Release. The ball arced through the air, cutting through the afternoon light. Swish. The court exploded with cheers. Rick laughed, deep and full. He hadn't realized how much he missed the sound. As he stood there, basking in the pure joy around him, he glanced at the mural again. At young Kobe, smiling wide, forever 12, forever dreaming. Rick raised his hand in a silent salute. Not goodbye. Just, we remember. The court thrummed with life, the heartbeat of a town that refused to forget, of dreams that refused to die. Lower Merion had lost a building. But it had gained something far greater. It had reclaimed its soul. And it wasn't going anywhere.